Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Tinnerman Cecil, and on behalf of Susie Spittler and Tom Beck, I want to welcome you to the 29th Oral History Taping. It is Thursday, October 16th, 2014, and we will hear from a past and a present Union Township trustee. Our first speaker is Jim Albaugh. Jim.
Thanks, Barb. First of all, let me say that I am one of 3 elected trustees, and the other 2 are unable to be with us today. Life happens, and this was scheduled several weeks ago, and some things came up, so I'm going to be the Lone Ranger representing the current trustees. I'm going to attempt to work through several topics and so forth as far as an outline, and I've got some notes here of things that I'd like to cover, and then I'll give Preston an opportunity to maybe reflect on some of the things that happened when he was during his tenure as a trustee. But first of all, let me talk a little bit about the structure of a trustee form of government. There are 3 elected trustees and 1 fiscal officer. We each serve a 4-year term. And the history of Union Township, it actually, and interestingly enough, if you look on the wall behind me, West Milton was founded in 1807, and Union Township was founded in July 21st of 1807, so the very same year. And Union Township was one of 5 original townships in Miami County. And over the years and as time passed, it was quite large, and those were broken into smaller configurations and smaller districts. And today, Union Township boundaries are on the west side is the Darke County line, the south side is the Montgomery County line. Our north boundary is Horseshoe Bend Road, and our east boundary is Kessler-Frederick Road. We do not operate in a vacuum. We are one of 1,308 townships in the state of Ohio. Township is a very basic form of local government. It starts, it's as low as it gets, but we don't mean that in a negative way. But it starts at home, and it's very local, and we pride ourselves on the knowledge that we have of local issues, and we're able to respond to those because we live here and we know what's going on. Personally, a little bit about me. I'm a lifetime resident of Union Township, and currently serving my 2nd full term. Sideline, I have a little bit of a history with the township. My father served as the clerk for 10 years back in 1954 to 63. As I was a young man growing up, I remember getting some sort of compensation for sweeping the old township building there that was at that time on Miami Street. And I'll talk a little bit about the history of the physical structure a little later. But we are one of 1,308. We're members of the Miami County Township Association, and we meet quarterly to discuss issues with other townships in the county. And we have a very good working relationship with all of those. We share some equipment, so forth and so on, and we share some disaster situation protocols based on what the situation might be. But we work very closely with our neighbors, as well as we have some snow removal agreements with some of our Darke County neighbors where the township's lines don't necessarily terminate at an intersection. So there are some roads in terms of snow removal that will plow a little bit of Darke County territory. They plow a little bit of Miami County, Union Township, so that we're not crossing the same roads necessarily. But we've worked out arrangements with several different entities. We also, as we talk about several of the things we're involved with, but one of the big ones coming up soon will be snow removal and road clearings. And we also work with the county to eliminate the need for duplication of roads. So we'll transfer some of the roads that we have responsibility for to the county and vice versa. We also have an arrangement with the village of West Milton to do the same. We have some shared roadways with them as well. But we do have 23 miles of roads. I'll move on into some of the things that we do as township trustees, and we have basically 3 primary areas of responsibility, and one of those is roads, the road surfaces, the ditches, the vegetation and so forth, and I'll expand on some of that in a little bit. The second big area is the cemeteries in the township. And I'll expand on that at this point in time. We have 12 cemeteries in Union Township. 8 of those are what we consider active, not meaning that the residents move around, but there is still activity in terms of burials and so forth. We do have 4 that are inactive. We are required to maintain those as well. Cemetery maintenance is becoming quite an issue. We're very proud of the fact that people appreciate the job we do in keeping them looking presentable, but it all comes at a cost and so forth. And so we're constantly looking at ways to continue to provide the service when the funding continues to go the other way sometimes. One area that's relatively new that we get involved with is fence line disputes. And in reading a history, I wanted to reference a little bit, if I can, this would be a good time, that in the year 2007, one of our several employees at the time put together a history of Union Township. I hope you can see that. And this is available through our office. It has a lot of historical information. Back in 2007, they were moving records around and found old history books, ledgers, so we're clear back into the 1800s. So a lot of good information, and that's available. Anyone that would like to have one can help themselves or avail themselves at the office. But I use that as a bit of a basis for my outline of some of the things. But it's interesting reading, particularly for those of us that have been here our whole lives. Thought we knew a little bit about what was going on, but I thought one of the things that I read that when they go back to the original 5 townships, they had to come up with names, and one of the founding fathers that went to the meeting said that people in his area, people in his township, when they meet, it's the conversations are all through a thoughtful purpose and a union of thought, or unity of thought. So they use that to come up with the name Union Township, and that's how it originated. And I thought that was rather interesting. Everybody has to come up with a name, but that's how they come up with that one. Getting back to the fence line disputes, that originally was a responsibility of the township trustees, and then it was more or less taken away. Well, then back in 2008, it was brought back under the purview of township trustees, and they changed the law. They spent several months rewriting the law, and it's rather involved now. And with all the changing and moving and new property lines being established and new fence line laws come into play, and so every once in a while we'll get asked to go out there and be the mediator, and it's not a comfortable situation, and it's one of those situations where there are no winners, and not everybody's happy with the decisions you reach. But it's just one of the things we're expecting to do. I think I'll back up and talk a little bit more about the roads, because that is our primary responsibility. And as I indicated, that includes the surfaces, the paving, the ditches along the side, and the drainage and so forth, and also the vegetation along the edges. One of the things that we're finding as time goes on, and township roads often are narrower than, say, some of the state and county roads, our right-of-ways lines often fall in line with the utility lines, the utility pole lines. Well, 50 to 100 years before there were utility poles, there were trees planted. And I don't know if this was a deliberate attempt to delineate lines so that the property owners knew where their right-of-way was, but now we have these 100-year-old trees that are growing up in utility, and you all recognize that last year they came out and they cut a big arch out of these beautiful maple trees. Well, they're all going to have to go eventually. But it's becoming a bit of an issue, and now the lower hanging branches, and we spend a good bit of time just clearing branches that drop down with the bigger equipment and so forth. Now the height becomes an issue. So that's another thing that's kind of come on the forefront in the last few years. And then In some areas, when you get very aggressive with the removal, 3, 4, 5 years later, you get regrowth, and it's a lot more aggressive. If you ever had bushes in the backyard and you trim them down, and 2 years later, you've got more bush than you ever had. So that becomes a bit of an issue as well, because we prune them back pretty hard, and well, then that just spurs a lot of new growth. Also, along with the line of sight and the drainage issues along the roads, there's a somewhat, I think, a misconception, or maybe just a lack of knowledge, but the purpose of ditches along the roads, would be it county or township or state, is to remove the water from the road bed so that the road bed stays solid and the water gets down and gets away. It's not designed necessarily to handle runoff water from properties. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Oftentimes there's subsurface drainage that will cross a roadway, and there'll be a culvert there or whatever. And oftentimes you'll find residents that will put a sump pump drain, basement drain, and dump it into the ditch. Not really supposed to do that. That's not the purpose of the ditch. So that becomes a little bit of a PR problem on how you handle all that, but basically it's supposed to be connected to a subsurface drainage system. Oftentimes those are difficult to find or non-existent. Somebody parcels off a few acres here, and there's a drainage tile down there tied to, nobody seems to know. So it's not a big issue, but every once in a while it will come up. We have been able to do some significant improvements in some of the roads for some drainage problems this spring with the 5-inch rain. Created some very vivid illustrations of some needs that were needing to be addressed. So we were able to do a new culvert crossing over on Monroe Concord Road, and then we did one last year on Lowry, and the year before we did Hall Road and Davis Road. So we're trying to update those crossings as time allows and funding permits. Our authority to govern as a township, group of township trustees, comes directly from the Ohio Revised Code, and there's a significant number of rules and laws that we're required to follow. Our funding comes from a number of sources, and I'm not going to go into all those because it all gets broken down to a lot of different funds and so forth, but we have experienced a significant reduction in funding, as all entities have, with the local government funding, and we did see a little bit of relief with the passage of the license plate increase of $5, and so that helps somewhat, but in the township, and I wanted to mention this earlier, that we do have, I think, 1,600 and some residents in the township. It doesn't count the populations of the villages and so forth and whatever. So that gives me a little bit of a size of the representation of how big we are. We're not real large township. We're not real small, but primarily agricultural, and so we don't have industrial revenues as a source of funding for the most part. A couple of other things that we're involved with, we started back in April of '04, the first one in Miami County, the Union Township Solid Waste District, and this was to provide the residents with an opportunity to get a better, quote, a better price for their waste removal by collectively bringing them all together and putting it out for bid, and we're able to attract 3 or 4 really good bids. The company that we have doing it has changed some over the few years, but we just entered into a new 5-year contract last year, and so we're going to be able to hold those costs in line at least for 4 more years. Talk a little bit about the physical property and the history of the township house. I remember as a kid we're going to the township house. I don't know why it was a house, it was an office, but it was always, that's where they held their meetings and so forth. And it was located on South Miami Street. I kind of, I'm playing on memory, but I think the old library used to be there maybe, and additions to that and an old theater up in the building next door, but it was at 35 South Miami, and they were there from 1872 until 1966. And in 1966, they built a new building on High Street, which is now Cemetery Drive, which is basically adjacent to Hale Sarver's funeral home on the north side of the road in there. They stayed there then in 2000 till 2002 when they moved to the current location on Markley Road. In 2005, we started, I'm sorry, I should say I came on board in '08, so they saw the need for additional cemetery capabilities here in the township, so they actually started a new cemetery there, Unity Cemetery, on Markley Road, and it's slowly filling. We hope real slow. We hope to sell a lot of lots. We hope to not fill them. But anyway, it's turning out quite nice. We're getting some shrubberies and trees and so forth, and the appearance is coming quite nice. We do rent the back part of that facility. For those of you that might not know, it's the old Kendall Tool and Die building. And the back part of that building is actually rented out to a company, and that gives us a source of revenue then to maintain the building. We were able to put a new coat of paint on this year and upgrade some electrical, so forth. And so that's worked out well. At this time, I'm going to take a break and let Preston talk about whatever he wants to talk about. We haven't really sat down and rehearsed this, so it's all kind of ad-lib off the cuff. So I'll have a couple comments here after Preston speaks to us.
Well, thank you, Jim. I'll start out with a question. You know, why did I decide to run for township trustee? You know, I'd been a farmer, was in the military, come back home, started working for Ward Jones for a couple of years, moved over to work for Bob Nestle for a couple of years, and volunteer fireman. So I guess I'll put my reason that I run for township trustee is some of the needs I've seen while I was working for Bob Nestle in the oil truck. Condition of the roads, condition of the bridges, and Bob Nestle. Bob kind of prodded me into running for township trustee, and in the long run, Arlene Clifton got a hold of me and helped push. So that was the end of the story on that one, and I got elected. We had some major projects that we wanted to look at to get done, and one was the Laurie estate. That thing had drug on for years, wasn't anything getting done with it. So Horace Fogel come on as a volunteer to help start the Senior Citizen Center. And that was one of my priorities to get working on after I got elected. Another priority was a lack of future income for the township, such as losing the railroad right-of-way for taxation money into the township. Why the townships didn't get together and do more to save the railroad. And at the same time, after that, we had the threat of Union, the village of Union, annexing the south part of Union Township. Same time that was going on, West Melton wanted to annex south of Melton, which would also took Union Township property. Okay, all this comes after I'm elected, but this is going through my mind while I was doing this. And to answer Susie's question on cemetery records, I think we got the first computer to start entering the township records after I got elected. And we ended up hiring Sandra Eastridge, thank you. If I don't have notes, I don't remember stuff like I used to. Condition of the roads, we had roads that was too narrow. Jim addressed that. We tried to least like on Markley Road, we tried to least widen that road by 4 feet when we blacktopped it. And it takes time, takes money, you know, like Jim said. Debbie helped us get the money. That was one of our priorities. And also, we had 11 bridges that was posted, which meant we couldn't run school buses across them, we couldn't run fire trucks across them. Legally, you couldn't run a salt truck across them. So that was all the issues I had in my mind when I run to get elected. Okay, got elected. So the senior citizens building went pretty well. I was really happy. We had some opposition, but not much. The biggest problem was from the time her will was read, it was contested. There was plenty of money in the will to support the Senior Citizen Center. But as time went on, the legalities ate up the money in the will. I think when we started actual construction, there was like only $86,000 left in that fund to do the senior citizens building and properties. So we got some volunteers. Horace Vogel started raising money. We used Dallin Nestle and Paul Johnson as engineers, so we didn't have to pay an engineer. That saved a lot of money. Austin Coat furnished equipment, heavy equipment, and actually helped put in the water and the sewer lines with no charge. Tommy Miller furnished tons and tons and tons of gravel towards the project, and just many numerous volunteers. Horace's group done a lot of fundraising to finish the inside of the building, and it all come together and was real active. And over time, we've lost a lot of members, and they're having a membership drive right now, try to get the membership back up. Barb, we're in that age group, we ought to join it. So, put down your $5. Okay. Road projects went along just pretty well. Had some controversy, like Jim was talking about the trees. Markley Road was one of the problems. We kept getting gravel in this one person's front yard, and they'd drive stakes so we couldn't get in their grass. It all worked out overall, but we got Markley widened by 4 feet. And I think that's about the time we started getting issue 2 money in. Deb, you remember?
Yes, and you worked on Davis Road too. You
Yeah.
built Davis.
Davis was the next major road that we did. Davis was classified as a haul road, which had different specifications, so it took different base. And we run into some problems, like a 4-inch rain we had one night and filled up the road 2 feet deep in water that we already had cut out. So we had to wait until that dried up. And if I remember correctly, we had to finish that road that year or issue 2 from it when they carried over till next year. So we didn't have a good solid base, but overall, I guess it worked out better than what it was to start with. Same time we was doing that, Debbie was helping us get issue 2 monies for the bridges. We had 11 posted. I think we got 7 replaced, repaired the short ones, all in a 5-year period. When we got done, we didn't have one bridge that was posted in Union Township. And that was cooperation of Miami County engineer. On the county roads, we helped them. On township roads, they helped us. Put a new bridge on Carnes Road. Bob Wheelock traded us property. We relocated the road, gave him the old road. We put the new bridge on his pasture field and made that intersection a lot better. But that was cooperation from everybody. So I think the road projects went well. We used some new technology on the roads. We put down a fiber before we blacktopped to keep the reoccurring cracks from coming back through. And, my gosh, that's been 20-some years ago. And some of the roads still look pretty good. Jim's doing a good job of crack sealing, which extends the life of the road quite a bit. I keep a good eye on Lawyer Road, and that's my property line on that side. Little things kept sliding in there that kind of messed things up. We had a sexual harassment suit against one of our employees. That was a new thing nobody had ever dealt with. We hired a company. Remember the name of that company, Deb?
Clemens and Nelson.
Clemens and Nelson. Pete was the guy's name. And he worked us through it. And we got through it without anybody getting real out of line. It was something new. It seemed like there was some lady in Dayton that filed a great big lawsuit against the city of Dayton, and just shortly after that, we got filed against. So we ended up having a change of personnel. Was that about the time you come in as being clerk?
No, that was pretty far in, maybe halfway through.
Halfway through?
Yeah.
So we all learned something off of that. And then we got, I think that's when we hired Tony.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Tony had some training in employee handbooks, thanks to the Village of West Milton. They paid for his training, and we hired him. So thanks, West Milton, for that. I think we're just about running out of, oh no, we had another good one in there. The Village of Frederick, all the water wells was dry. It didn't matter if they drilled a 400-foot well or we drilled a 40-foot well, they couldn't get any water. And that run clear up to 571 almost. So we chased around and we found funding that we could have started the water district. The Township trustees physically can't run a water district. They have to have a district set up as a water district. But the people that didn't live in Frederick didn't want the extra property taxes on their frontage. And the law said that if we'd have run a new line, there wouldn't have been any additional taxes on their property, but nobody would believe it. And it got so heated that Gary Pierce and Gary was one of the trustees, we got threatening phone calls at our homes. So we didn't get that project even off the ground. It should have been. The worst thing that come out of that was Frederick went ahead and got annexed by Union. Excuse me. And Union brought water across the Stillwater River clear up to Miller's headquarters there. They never took it to the houses that really needed it. But if they would have, that would have taken more property out of Union Township also. So evidently we haven't had a dry year since, because we haven't heard a whole lot. I guess some people put cisterns in, but you still have to buy water, which I guess everybody's going to have to run into that sometime or another. So I guess we crossed that one off to experience. And you really seen how neighbors didn't help neighbors on that project. About all the other projects we had, the township cooperated fully. Just all we had to do was ask and it got done. And the cemetery records was ongoing every year. Rudy's every Christmas hand out little notebooks you can carry in your pocket, And we was finding cemetery records on Rudy's notebooks that was stuck in pockets of trucks and old papers and old books. They found more when they moved to township, probably. But Sunday Easter just spent day after day after day trying to put all that together and probe cemeteries to try to see a lot of people buried without headstones. You know, during the Depression, very few headstones got put up. And old Ludlow had sandstone headstones you couldn't read anymore. And so you had to use tracing paper and, you know, try to get that duplicated. But, so you're still working on that project, huh?
Yes, there we are.
Probably never will. But Monroe Township got a different system than we started with. They started their system after we did. I don't remember the name of the company we hired.
Burroughs.
Burroughs, was it? And we did Riverside first.
Yes.
Yeah, we mapped Riverside and got that one pretty well done before 93. Yeah. So,
Had the most current records. So most of the records, most of the burials were at Riverside, so I think it's part of that process.
I think when I got out trustee, we had like 160 some open graves left. So there wasn't many left to be sold. There's a lot of empties, but people already own them. You know, like somebody would buy a lot of 8 graves and they only used 6 and never did anything to the other 2. So I don't know what the trustees are doing about that now, whether you can reclaim them or not, but a lot of singles down there that could have been used. Jim, I'm getting about out of wind here.
Okay.
Have you picked up again there?
Yeah, I've got just a couple more things I'd
All right.
like to share. But in reference to Riverside, we are sold out. There are maybe half a dozen single graves left. There are no combination graves, no doubles, anything. It's sold out. And that was another one of the reasons why they started the Unity out in Markley Road. And I shouldn't speak, but I will. There may be a possibility of expanding Riverside. It hasn't been researched and hasn't been pursued, but that's maybe a long-term possibility. It's not going to happen real soon, I'm sure. A couple of other things that we do get involved with, and I guess most of the purpose, or my purpose of being here today, was trying to help inform the public of some of the things we do. And so that's why we're kind of getting on the day-to-day nitty-gritty stuff we get involved with. But we get half a dozen to a dozen complaints each year over noxious weeds or overgrown vegetation. Generally, and as the housing market kind of took a negative turn over the last few years, we see a lot of abandoned properties. And we have non-resident ownership. It may be a finance company in Waco, Texas owns this property, or whatever. And of course the neighbors want the grass cut and the weeds taken care of. So we've had occasion to where our policy, we established a policy that we don't act unless we get a written complaint from a neighbor, because you have to have a policy of some sort. You just can't arbitrarily go out there and decide to mow this one, not mow that one. So upon receipt of a written complaint, we'll investigate it, and if it warrants, and generally it does, because people aren't going to complain. So we'll go ahead and mow it, and then we basically, once a year, we have an opportunity to turn that cost over to the county prosecutor, and then they put it on the tax records that go with the property. So if you buy an abandoned foreclosed property, there's a real good possibility there's going to be some attachments there just to keep the grass cut. Just word to caution anybody might be in the market for one of those. It's getting better this year. I think we only had maybe 6 that we had to do last year, year before we had upwards of a dozen. And so it is getting better. We did have one situation that worked out quite well. The neighbor came to us, complained. He said, "I'd just like permission to go cut it." And I said, "Well, the owners in New Mexico, I don't think they're going to have a problem." So he basically just mowed it, and for 2 years, eventually ended up buying the property. And the improvement that he had made by mowing, he actually helped him work a deal with the owners. So once in a while, things work out for the best, but generally it becomes a negative deal, and somebody's not happy again when they find that they want to buy that property. It's kind of an attachment. As I mentioned, we're getting into the snow season. Hopefully not real soon, but it's right around the corner. And I'm sure most of you have been following the newspapers and so forth on the salt situation. We deal with the county and get our supply from them. The last conversation we had with the county engineer, they did not have theirs locked in yet. So hopefully there's ongoing communications, and that'll happen here post haste, because we're pretty much relying on them to have that supply. We have some storage, but not near enough for what we would use in a year. So we will fill our storage on down days, and then when we actually get into the snow removal, we take out of our warehouse to refill the trucks, and then as time permits, we'll replenish the warehouse supply. That's kind of the way we've been doing it. It's worked out well. Last year really put a strain on everybody, because that was just a real severe situation. 2 years before that, we didn't use up our preliminary supply. It just didn't snow, and maybe we'll have another one like that. I don't know. Preston talked a little bit about road surfacing and widening, and you know, it's really good that they did those things back 20 plus years ago, because it did maintain the substrata on a lot of these roads, but it's a challenge. The cost to lay on asphalt is astronomical, and so we're doing things like a process called mill and fill. And if you go out on Calumet or some of the other roads, you'll see where we actually had machinery come in, took out a section of bad pavement, put down new, and to basically just buy some time. And as he mentioned, we've over the last 3 years, we have crack sealed each of the township roads. We finished the last bunch of them this spring. We do that in the spring so that the asphalt crack material has an opportunity to get warm in the summer and bleed down through the cracks and seal them off better. So we do that early in the spring. We'll probably be going back over again, because it does prolong the surface. And basically that's all we can do. The last road we paved was Markley Road from 48 to 571, and a little over a mile and a quarter, whatever that distance, at a cost of like $125,000 just to put blacktop on that road. And I'll get in trouble here, because I'm going to quote a number that's probably not real accurate, but annually we will receive funding somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 for road maintenance. Well, you can see that if we did anything at all, that number goes down. So then if we're trying to put together enough dollars to actually pave a length of road, we have to basically sandbag that money for 2 or 3 years to get enough revenue to put it down. Well, if you do the math with 23 roads and it takes 3 years to do 1 mile, you can see where we are. It's a challenge, but we are, by using some of these other processes, able to keep the roads in fairly good condition. One of the other issues that we were running into, and I'm not, I'm not necessarily picking on a class of people, but most township roads are utilized the most by people in the agricultural industry. And our equipment has gotten so big and so heavy, and the roads, even in 1995, were not designed for the tonnages and the weight that we're putting on them. So we're seeing, some deterioration basically just from the sheer 100+ thousand pound loads that are going up and down the roads on a fairly routine basis, particularly this time of the year, if the weather cooperates. But, so that added some challenges to the mix, you know, but interesting, we're still using Clemens and Nelson, Debbie, so that's
Okay.
been on for a long, long time. They monitor what we're doing and help us with our employee handbooks. And one of the things that has probably come out of some of that early on situation way back, you know, we have a lot of mandated employee conferences and trainings and so forth that they're all required to attend. We had a drug-free workplace training last week, and we do monthly safety training meetings with employees. We go everything from hooking up the snow plow to weed whacking, running power equipment, mowing, and so forth and so on. So all those things are covered on a fairly regular basis. I really don't have a lot else to add. If anybody has a question, I'd try to answer it, Barb or Susie or anyone. But we certainly appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all about what happens in the township. And I'm just really pleased that I'm able to participate in it and be part of it. My background so forth, so it's being a resident of the township my whole life, and I've worked in agriculture and I've farmed all those years, and I work construction. I understand a little about infrastructure and so forth, and so it really is a job that's well suited to what I feel like I'm qualified to do, and the time element and so forth, which really works out well. So I'm just really blessed to be able to serve, and I really appreciate the trust that the residents have put in me to allow me to work for them. So, do you have a question, Bob?
Now, I got some, go along with what Jim said about their income going down. All Ohio residents know that the inheritance tax is eliminated. Well, used to, you'd look at one road and say, yeah, Mr. So-and-so passed away last year. He bought that road. Well, they don't have that privilege anymore. It was on my understanding that the commercial activity tax that was enacted by the state of Ohio was supposed to take place then. It's never happened. I've talked to quite a few towns and townships, and that money is not coming back to replace that inheritance tax. But when we was only paying like $26 a ton for blacktop, you know.
Makes a little difference.
Sure. What you paying now? Almost 100?
Well,
78, 80, bet you.
I don't know. Our bids come in as a lot unit, and it's not priced per ton anymore.
Yeah.
It's so many dollars to do so many square feet, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
It really is.
You know, a lot of things we did, we might have been ahead of our time in a way. We had Jim Fletcher that was actually working at Bowser-Warner Testing Laboratories. And he volunteered to run tests on our blacktop that we was getting out of these ready-mix companies. And we had one company that pulled off the job when they seen the Bowser-Warner truck sitting there. That was on Markley Road. Took their blacktop back to Troy. And they probably remember that, you know. Somewhere they couldn't lay it on their job, so they brought it to us. And the state goes, there's a certain standard it has to meet before, you know, it'll be a good lasting road.
What about some past trustees, like Moon Earhart? I remember Moon. Do you remember Moon?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Moon was a DP&L troubleshooter for years, and then he got trustee. Moon didn't do much out in the field.
Okay.
He was more of an administrator.
Okay,
I was a field man myself.
okay.
Debbie getting me all the time, well, you gotta do your paperwork too. Yeah, but I can't get my work done out in the field if I'm doing paperwork in the office. But that's where I like to be, so that's what I did.
Sure. Hey, this has been most interesting. Thank you very much. Jim Albaugh, Preston Moat, Debbie Kress, thank you for your comments. Thank you for your service. takes
You're
a lot of time to keep everything running in Union Township. So thank you both very much for you, Preston, for your service, and Jim for your current service. So we appreciate
Quite
it.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Okay, it's a wrap.
Well, that went pretty
You
good.
did well.